the oil and gas sector, and it is shrinking. In 2000, the oil and gas sector contributed 30% to Nigeria's GDP. Today, it's just 8%. Yet, we're still heavily dependent on revenues from the sale of crude oil. Now, let's put that in perspective. The second largest sector is agriculture, and it employs at least 35 million Nigerians. But guess what? The sector remains unproductive because more of these Nigerians are likely to be poor because there are too many of them producing too little because they do not have enough funds to mechanize the agricultural operations. And when you now add in the growing insecurity, which prevents many subsistence farmers from going to the farms to either plant or harvest, we're not surprised that the prices of all the major foodstuffs continue to increase week on week. And Nigeria is currently facing a serious bout of food insecurity. Now, Nigeria is an import-based economy. In 2019, the manufacturing sector received over 8 billion in foreign exchange for imports, yet it remains very uncompetitive and contributes little to the country's GDP. We're not producing.
Yeah.
Now, finally, the most productive sector is the information and communication sector, which accounts for about a 15% contribution to Nigerian GDP. Yet it is largely and misunderstood by the government. Now, having said that, the economy is in shambles. And these people are either supposed to be employed by formal organizations or start a business for themselves.
Yeah.
Now, for those who want to start a business for themselves, energy cost alone will probably take at the minimum 50% of your startup and your revenue. Then you have the various state and local government agencies imposing all measure of taxes on you, which can frustrate your business. Not to Then you haven't even come to the contradictory policies of related federal government agencies stifling business. Now, our population is still growing. Currently, we're not even sure of the official figure, but it's anywhere between 180 and 200 million.
Yeah.
Now, every year, our secondary schools churn out millions of Nigerians. Now, only about 10 to 20% end up in universities or polytechnics. The remaining 80%, where do they end up? And when people do not have jobs, it is a basic human instinct to want to survive.
Yeah. So, Mr. C, let me ask a question. What would you then say is the solution? Like, I know you've talked about the different sectors, but two things, immediate and long-term solution, because we have a big insecurity challenge in our hands and we want to solve it. And we've seen the link, of course, with unemployment figures and the reality of unemployment. What would you say is an immediate response and perhaps a long-term response?
Okay, so an immediate response to this insecurity that is pervading the land will be multi-pronged. One, there has to be justice. Now, for some reason, there hasn't been the fair and uniform application of justice across board. Some criminal elements are perceived in some quarters to be treated fairer than other criminal elements. And without justice, there will be no peace. Beyond that, we need to start encouraging informal businesses, because the formal businesses cannot engage or hire everyone. So we need to engage and provide grants and provide an enabling environment that, okay, if I give Ayo money to start a business now, to encourage her and her business, for the first 2 or 3 years, I will grant her, the business, a tax holiday. Now that encourages her to start the business. And then also, beyond giving her the grant, and providing advisors to guide her along the way. That, okay, how do you move the business from the inception stage to the next stage? Now that is also partly immediate. Then the long-term solutions are the government should hands off creating jobs, encourage the private sector completely, stop the contradictory policies that emanate from different agencies, and create a uniform regulatory framework, because that is what is carrying away the investors today.
All right.
Investors want to make money, but
Absolutely.
when the regulatory framework is uncertain, they're not going to come.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Shagun says, if only we invested wisely or saved our earnings when oil money was sweet. Yeah, that's a nice way to reminisce, but now we have to look forward. We didn't. What are we going to do now? Premium Times reports INEC here to commence issuance of PVCs to eligible Anambra electorate 2 weeks to election. You know, one thing I like about this report, Mr. C, is that they got information from a Twitter user, but they did their own investigation to either verify or debunk the claim, which they verified, that in Anambra State, the election holds on the 6th of November, so that's in 2 weeks. They haven't yet issued PVCs. Now we talk about this. We talk about disenfranchisement. We talk about the state of security. In fact, there were questions around would the elections hold at all. And in our next story, we would see also other things that seem to be, shall I say, hampering the successful one of these elections. What do you make of INEC's reason for not issuing the PVCs, and just general take on this?
Okay, thank you, Ayo. So the Anambra elections, like you've correctly said, are scheduled to hold on the 6th of November. Now, there was a registration exercise which was conducted in the first week of October, and by the 7th of October, the new registrants were supposed to have collected the permanent voter cards. Now, 2 weeks later, precisely on the 21st, as the investigation reveals, no one has been advised to come and pick up the permanent voters cards. So a question that arises is INEC deliberately trying to disenfranchise portions of the voting public in Anambra from participating in the elections? Now, I'm looking for their response. They claim that they are printing the PVCs presently. For the love of everything good, there was a timeline. You must know, because they've been printing cards before. They must have an idea by now of how long it takes to print the card. So just saying that you're still printing the cards isn't sustainable. It's not acceptable. And then the point is, at what point do they eventually want to announce that the voters can come up and collect their cards? And what happens if the period allocated for collection is insufficient? That means Nigerians who were legally eligible to vote, but could not vote because INEC couldn't sort out their administrative deficiencies, are prevented from voting. Now, having said that, there's a bigger backdrop, there's a bigger elephant in the room. IPOB has vowed that elections will not hold in Anambra State. Now, the question will arise, is IPOB that powerful? It would appear to some extent they have some influence, because their sit-at-home orders for Monday in the Southeast have largely been successful. The governors in the Southeast states have complained. They've tried to urge their people to open for business. But on Mondays in the Southeast, it's usually quiet. It almost has the feel of a cemetery, and businesses do not open. So the bigger question is, INEC, can you truly say you're prepared to conduct the elections on the 6th of November, which is about 2 weeks away, when all the eligible voters do not have the PVCs?
Do you think it's possible for them to deploy these PVCs in 2 weeks? Because there's a talk about capacity in this article, and the fact that, of course, I mean, some of their offices were burned, and that perhaps they don't have the capacity to manage this process.
So even if no office was burnt, I'm not sure 2 weeks is sufficient for everyone to come and collect the cards. Because don't forget, we still have the COVID-19 regulations in place.
Absolutely,
So can they handle the deluge that will swarm their offices if it's time to collect? I don't think so.
All right, let's then go on to this next story, since you touched on this in your analysis. Declare bandits. I'm looking for the second Anambra story. All right, okay, so there was a headline actually in the news. I think we took it out, but around the president talking tough against the declared sit at home, IPOB declaring a sit at home for people not to come out to vote. Is that, like you mentioned, is IPOP that powerful? We've seen that, I mean, to a large extent, they wield influence, whether by force or by being able to mobilize or being able to lobby the people enough to stay at home. What would you say the government is handling this IPOP issue, this IPOP issue? Are they handling it properly? Should they come to the negotiation table with Namdi Kanu and IPOB, or do you think that, like, we don't negotiate with terrorists since the government would rather view them as terrorists?
Okay, so I'll start this way. IPOP, depending on which part of the divide you belong to or which school of thought you subscribe to, is either very powerful or nuisance. But either way, you have some people who live in the southeast aligning themselves with their beliefs and their aspirations. And you cannot throw that away. You can proscribe an organization, you can proscribe an association. You cannot proscribe a belief, you cannot proscribe an aspiration. That having been said, the government has labeled IPOP as terrorists. The question is, where's the evidence? Now, they're quick to declare IPOP as terrorists, but bandits and kidnappers who do much worse things are still called bandits and terrorists.
Let's talk about that thing you just mentioned. The next headline: declare bandits, kidnappers as terrorists. Speakers tell Buhari. So the Conference of Speakers of the State Legislatures of Nigeria, that's 36 states. So they are the speakers of the State House of Assembly. They've called on President Muhammadu Buhari to declare bandits and kidnappers as terrorists after brainstorming for about 9 hours on how to end security challenges bedeviling the country. What they've said is that by correctly labeling them, the security agencies can then tackle them the way they ought to be tackling. So we could say that we could infer that they mean that they've been handled with kids' gloves or gloves that are not thick enough to properly handle them. What do you think of this? We've talked about this a number of times, mind. So this is just another group coming out to say that let's label them as terrorists. What do you think?
So this is a heavy-handed response to what I spoke about earlier.
Okay.
Why are people turning to banditry and abductions? Because first of all, they're criminally minded. That must be stated clearly.
Yeah.
But beyond the criminal inclinations, they are trying to survive. Now,
the bandits.
They're bandits and kidnappers. Yes, they're criminals who are trying to survive the illegal way.
Okay.
Well, I started off by saying it's criminal. Now, there's more to this than the speakers are saying. Declare bandits and kidnappers as terrorists. Now, remember that Nigeria bought some jets recently, but as part of the terms of sale, those jets could only be used in the Northeast to fight Boko Haram specifically. Now, there's been some clamor within the security circles that we need to designate bandits and kidnappers as terrorists so the jets can be deployed to other areas. And there's a fear that part of these other areas that they will be deployed to include the Southeast. Now, when you declare bandits and kidnappers as terrorists, right, what you're then saying is, we're now going to treat you as violent individuals and we will kill you first before we ask questions.
Yeah.
Now, two things could come out. It could go either way. The first way could be that most of them will drop their arms and then resort back to a life of peace, which is highly unlikely in the Nigerian circumstance. The second one, it will harden their resolve and they'll be like, okay, you know what? Either way, we're going to die. If we don't die of poverty, we're going to die because of military actions against us. So either way, we're prepared for death. Now, the long-term solution, now this is a short-term solution. The long-term solution is educating the people. Now, you have to educate the people. And it's not just sending them to school, you have to educate their minds. Now, when you educate the people and you provide an enabling environment to make money, trust me, if some of these individuals, if not most of them, were educated and had an enabling environment to make money, no one wants to carry a gun. They'll sit there and want to make money and live like normal human beings. Now, that education includes de-radicalizing most of them who've been indoctrinated.
Yeah.
And it's a long-term plan. But this is a very interesting plan.
Yeah.
And we've seen where Boko Haram insurgents have been arrested, have been picked up. Then we hear they've been rehabilitated.
Mhm. All right, Jerry says, good morning, Aya and Mr. C. Thank you. So going back to the first story, thank you for mentioning that grants to the grants to SMEs. It's the 10 million that we got from DJ's government, that you win project that has kept us going. We run a dry cleaning company with staff. This government is not sincere on anything. Samuel from Lekki says, I know it may sound funny in Nigeria, but must we register before we are allowed to vote? Shouldn't our NIN registration be enough to let us vote, given that it takes an average person a minimum of a day to register and months to get the PVC plus the issue of relocation? We're going to be talking about the NIN registration next. However, let me take a few more comments. Cisco Delgado, the happenings in Anambra State is simply a strategy to install APC governorship in the state. Recall the problems in Imo State started after APC put their candidate as the governor. Ace says, good morning all. I disagree that correctly, in quote, labeling bandits as terrorists will make the armed forces handle them as enemies of the state. No, before this country, we've seen detained Boko Haram members released with little or no prosecution. In this current Nigeria, certain people should be killed while others should be spared. AGF says the truth about banditry and terrorism will be cleared when the president leaves office. Trevor Noah's lapel pin says, I was in Enugu on Friday for an event which was impacted by the IPOB sit-at-home order. IPOB and bandits are terrorists. Why can't governors in these states provide an enabling business environment? That's a very fair and valid point, Mrs. C. Because a number of people have said we keep talking about the federal government, but the governors have a role to play. It's almost as if we absolve them of responsibility of governance, whereby their hands are, they say their hands are tied and we don't even look at them. We're just looking at the presidency. What is the governor of Anambra State doing? What is the governor of Imo State doing? You know, they are closer to the people than the federal government. So how are they engaging with their people? Because there's also a place of engagement and dialogue.
Sadly, most of our leaders do not deserve to be in those offices. They
Yeah.
do not know what it takes to govern the state, and they're not prepared to do the work.
All right. Okay, so let's go to this NIN SIM linkage. Subscribers want 2 month extension as deadline nears. I think we should turn this into a series. Part 1, part 2, part 3, deadline extravaganza deadline, because the telecommunication subscribers, they say, are clamoring for a 2 month extension of the October 31 deadline for national identity number NIN subscriber identity module data verification. The president of National Association of Telecom Subscribers, there is an association. Are you part of that? There's so many associations that spring up. Adio Lugumbanjo highlighted the need to further extend the deadline of the SIM registration. Mr. C, deadline day is this Sunday. Are we ready to cut off people who haven't linked their SIM to, or the NIN to the SIM?
To answer your question first, I don't think the government or the NCC has the required political will to enforce that deadline. Now, the first deadline.
But they say the date is sacrosanct, according to NCC.
We've heard that before. We heard that in January, we heard that in March, we heard that in June, and we're going to hear it in October, that the date is sacrosanct. Now, about the figures vary. About between 60 and 87 million Nigerians have linked their national identification numbers to their SIMs. Now, about 100 million haven't done it. Now, if 100 million people didn't do it in almost 10 months, how are they going to do it in 2? It's not going to happen.
Yeah, because they keep asking for extensions, but
you see, the average Nigerian knows that once they know you're going to extend the deadline, you'll just relax. Cut them off. When you cut them off, they now become very responsible human beings and they're going to do the proper
thing.
But
do you think NCC has done enough work or given enough time for the millions of Nigerians to register? Because if you're going to ask people to give penalty or to penalize people who haven't registered, you must make sure that you have done your own bit. I've done enough, so now I'm going to punish you.
From January to October is more than enough time.
You think so?
I know so, because if any of them feels aggrieved, proceed to court. I would like to see what you tell the court. Now, between January and October, you couldn't find a day. You couldn't find 3 hours from January to October to sit down and get this done.
All right, let me ask, and I will take this further during Lagos Talks 91. If you haven't registered or registered, number one, registered your NIN, to get your NIN, and you haven't linked your SIM to it, please tell us why, so that we can really understand if you're one of these irresponsible people that, I mean, okay, let me not say responsible, you are responsible, but lack of response to the call, indifferent, or you just have there's an apathy, you're not interested. Please share with us why you haven't registered, or maybe the process is tedious, you haven't gotten time off work, the time was too short, you forgot. Let's understand the reason why, so we'll see if NCC is indeed justified to cut you off the network. Oluwatosin from Yaba says IPOB sit at home is largely successful because the Nigerian state is unable to provide adequate security to the Nigerian citizens in the southeast. Governors tell their citizens to ignore IPOB, but at their own risks. IPOB controls the southeast with terror and violence. This is a shame. Ike says, the governor of Imo State does not have the legitimacy or moral authority to counter the sit-at-home directives. In fact, it is a way of the people showing their defiance, albeit self-harming. Cisco Delgado says, Nigeria is not serious. Registration of NIN should be a continuous exercise. I think I tend to sit with this point of view, Mr. Sim. That's why I'm saying that. It's only that if we don't have cut-off dates, people will not do it. So maybe... All right, okay, so let's go on to the next one. Prison attacks meant to ridicule government, says Minister of Interior Ogbeni Rauf Aregbesola. He's vowed that all inmates who escaped from the Abolongo Custodial Center of the Nigeria Correctional Service in Oyo State on Friday night will be recaptured. Isn't it interesting when state actors make such this big statement, we're going to capture all? Have they finished getting back the people from the Benin prison? Have they, the inmates who escaped, have we gotten them back? And they're saying that, anyways, he noted that 446 out of 907 escapees have been recaptured, while 69 never left the facility. So 907 minus 446. Let's do a quick math right there. And 168. So we still have 401.
451.
Was it 400? Oh yeah, 451. I beg your pardon. 451. Still on the run. Yeah, that's the word. What do you make of this statement? And then is it true that they just want to ridicule his government? And then there's something else he said that I have to point out. He said it's since the NSAS protest, this is when inmates have started breaking. How do you link? What's the link? I'd like to know, please.
Okay, so with all due respect to the Minister of Interior, this is a statement that should not have been made. He should simply have addressed the prison outbreak. And it's no surprise in Nigeria, but it will be a complete shock in a properly run country that after 3 previous jailbreaks, he's still minister. He should have resigned or be fired. This is the 4th jailbreak. The first Owerri, Benin, Kaba, now Oyo. And it appears that with each attack, nothing was learned. It's still the same MO, by the way, is modus operandi or method of operation. They storm the prison in large numbers, explosives, there's a shootout, and inmates are forcibly freed. Now, I don't understand the link to NSAS. What was the NSAS protest about? To protest the annoying and obnoxious behavior of the defunct Special Anti-Robbery Squad and the general bad behavior by extension of the Nigerian police force. That was what that protest was about, unfortunately. To further say that it's designed to ridicule the government, what does that mean? What does that even mean? So we have a situation where the state cannot secure custodial correction centers. It cannot secure locations of its own security agencies. Yet every day we hear the same parroted tune that we're on top of the security situation. How? So imagine if you testified against a violent criminal, the criminal was convicted, and he was in this prison, and you now hear there was a prison attack and the person's out. That will leave you in a state of trepidation and fear. So clearly, the Nigerian state is failing on so many fronts, and security is one of them. And remember that security was one of the major planks that the president campaigned on in 2015 and 2019, citing his supposed record as a general of the Nigerian army to buttress it. And so far, sure that even the most diehard supporters of his will agree he hasn't fully performed at the very best with regards to security.
All right, thank you. So let's talk about e-Naira. Banks in defining moments as e-Naira kicks off today. Nigeria makes history today as it becomes the first African country to digitize its currency and exercise the Central Bank of Nigeria has described as one of the milestones of a long journey. This report is in The Guardian. You might want to read this. Mr. C, a number of people want to understand how this will work. And before the show, I'd asked you if you had enough, sufficient information for people to understand how this will work, what problems it will solve, or what issues it will tackle, and then how it will make the lives of Nigerians in the banking sector or users, how it will make our lives more, how it make it easier.
Okay, thank you, Aya. So the central bank has finally adopted and commenced the operation of the e-Naira. Now, the e-Naira is the central bank's digital version of the physical Naira. So it's going to operate just like your cryptocurrencies and runs on blockchain technology. Now, very quickly, what is blockchain technology? So blockchain is essentially a digital ledger of transactions that is duplicated and distributed across the entire network of computer systems on the system. Now, what that means is for everyone who's transacting on that blockchain, each person gets a copy of the records. So if anyone tries to hack in, he has to hack into all the records distributed to each customer. So that means the system is safe. But beyond that, what the central bank is saying is that we'll float the e-Naira, and then you have to have an e-wallet. But we're going to tie it to BVNs and NINs. So what that means is for purposes of anti-money laundering safeguards and protocols, they will be able to trace everyone who's transacting with the e-Naira. Now, when you contrast that with the existing cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and the rest, they're peer-to-peer, meaning that it's from one customer to another. There's no intermediary. So what does that say for the banks? Now, the banks are concerned because, first of all, to fund your e-Naira wallet, you have to convert part of your existing deposit with them into your e-wallet. And they fear that as they're cut off from that transaction space, because they're no longer the middleman, transaction incomes they would have derived will no longer be there. So for example, I want to send money to you, the bank charges, my bank charges a fee, your bank charges a fee, that's gone. So the banks have to adapt very quickly, and the fear of adaptation is that jobs will be lost. But beyond that, I'm not sure this will be acceptable to most parts of the Nigerian population, because most parts of the Nigerian population are already illiterate. Then to now deal with modern technology, that's a big stretch. But let's see how it goes.
All right, what do you think? Chris or Six from Aja says, please, e-Naira is not on blockchain, that it's built on fiber network.
No, the CBN, the originators of the project, say to run on blockchain. So we have to, for now, go with what they say.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. C, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much for coming today. We will take conversations further during Lagos Talks 91, which is in 8 minutes. Here we will open the phone lines. If you have things you'd like to share with us, please do call us on 0144899981. We'll be responding to all the headline stories that we've touched on this morning. My name is Ayo Myro Esse, and Mr. C is Adi Mr. C on all social media platforms. Let's talk at 8:10 a.m.
The headlines.
Thank you so much, Mr. C.
You're welcome.
In-depth analysis of national current affairs.